They say betrayal feels like a knife in the back, but for me it was a plastic badge tossed into a trash bin. "We've reassessed you." Ivy Brandt smirked. She was perched in the leather chair her father once ruled from like a general on campaign. "To 0. She flicked her wrist, and my ID badge, 10 years of loyalty, late nights, $1 million contracts, landed in the bin with the hollow clink of something disposable. I stood very still, hands clasped neatly behind my back, the way I used to when presenting quarterly projections to investors. The way I did during crises, when calm was the only weapon. She thought she was breaking me. All she did was confirm I'd been right to prepare. Behind her hovered Tucker, her new assistant, 22 years old, finance bro haircut. The kind of grin that comes only when you've never failed at anything that mattered. He snorted like Ivy had delivered the line of the century. "You've been here since, the fax machine era?" Ivy twirled her father's pen between two manicured fingers like a villain in training. She barely looked at me as she scrolled her phone with the other hand. "Your legacy bloat. We're streamlining. You'll land somewhere." She tossed a manila envelope across the desk. It skidded to a stop next to a half-eaten acai bowl, bright purple melting into paperwork. "Generous exit package. HR is waiting. Security will walk you out in 10. I bent to pick up the envelope. Not because I cared about the money, but because I wanted to see if she'd flinch when I stood back up. She didn't. That's when I saw it. Framed behind her, slightly crooked, like the universe had a sense of humor. The original investor covenant. 12 years ago, I had helped draft that document in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and panic. My name was still there, etched in legal permanence. Key operational stakeholder, Laura Keller. I let myself smile, just a flicker. "You don't seem upset," Ivy said, narrowing her eyes. She expected tears, begging, bargaining. Instead, I gave her silence. Silence unnerves people like Ivy more than shouting ever could. She pressed her father's executive stamp onto a form without aligning it properly. His name came out crooked, smeared, unauthorized terminations scrawled like graffiti across the page. She didn't even notice. Security appeared in the doorway, all polite smiles and stiff postures like hotel concierges who know the tip won't be good. One of them carried the infamous gratitude basket. Caramel popcorn, a stale voucher for a massage, a corporate condolence prize. I didn't touch it. I walked out past Ivy, past Tucker's smirk, past the interns trying not to look horrified, and through the glass doors I'd opened every day for over a decade. Outside, the air was cold, sharp, clean. It tasted like freedom. But freedom without a plan is just chaos. Luckily, I'd been planning for years. At home, I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of wine, and slid into my workstation. Not the company laptop. I left that sitting on the desk untouched. This was my real gear. The encrypted archive that had hummed quietly under my desk since 2014, built after the first time I caught an executive doctoring compliance logs. Password accepted. Biometric scan confirmed. The interface glowed awake. I navigated straight to my legal folder, and there it was. Covenant version 3.4, redlined and notarized. The clause that mattered was highlighted, annotated by my attorney years ago. Any involuntary termination of designated stakeholder without investor, advisement constitutes breach. Penalty enforceable. $45 million or immediate assumption of control by Everlock Capital. Clause 14. C, my safety net. My hammer. I remembered the day we added it. 6 years ago, with investors breathing down our necks, lawyers circling, everyone paranoid about stability. Executives are reckless, my attorney had said. Eventually, they'll do something stupid. This clause protects you. And now Ivy, in all her arrogance, had just handed me the stupid I'd been waiting for. I scrolled through margin notes, double-checking the language. There was no ambiguity, no wiggle room. Not only had they fired me without notice, they had triggered the nuclear option themselves. My phone buzzed. Anderson, my attorney. "Activate it," I said. My voice was steady, almost casual. Version 3.4. Pause. Then, understood. I leaned back, sipped my wine, and let the silence wash over me. Because while Ivy was probably posting a Boss Babe CEO selfie to LinkedIn, the investors would be reading an automatic notification of breach. And investors don't scroll. They act. By the time the sun dipped low, emails had already started hitting inboxes. Subject line: urgent. Compliance triggered. Clause 14. See and somewhere, on a jet slicing through clouds at 40,000 feet, Mitchell Brandt, the man whose shadow still haunted this company, Ivy's father, the real power, was being notified that his daughter had just set off a $45 million bomb. The storm wasn't coming. It had already landed. The first call came less than 2 hours after I walked out of that glass tower. I was halfway through reheating leftover pasta when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. If it was important, they'd leave a message. They did. 3 messages, in fact, all variations of the same frantic voice. Laura, please, we need to talk. Call us back. By the time I sat down at my kitchen table, the inbox on my private email was already swelling. Subject lines like Clause 14C breach protocol and investor notification pending. Every one of them confirmed what I already knew. The covenant had detonated. The real confirmation, though, came an hour later. A black SUV screeched to the curb outside Ivy's kingdom and outstepped her father, Mitchell Brandt. Tailored charcoal suit, travel lines still etched into his face, eyes like a man pulled mid-flight from Tuscany to a battlefield. I wasn't there to see it in person, but former colleagues texted me in a flurry. He stormed straight into the lobby, no bag, no smile. Just rage inside. Ivy must have been basking in her newfound empire, sipping some wellness tea while drafting her vision for the future email. She didn't know yet that the future was about to collapse around her. The boardroom doors slammed. Someone close to the floor later told me they could hear his voice from the elevator bank. You fired who? Silence. Are you insane? There it was. The first crack in Ivy's perfectly filtered persona. From what I gathered, Tucker tried to explain, fumbling something about legacy costs and streamlining operations. But Mitchell wasn't listening. He wanted names. He wanted contracts. And when Gregory, the CFO with the nervous laugh, finally admitted my termination had triggered Clause 14C, Mitchell went white. For years, investors had tolerated his empire because of stability. The covenant was their insurance policy. And now his daughter had cut the safety line with a single arrogant move. I wasn't watching in person, but I didn't need to. I'd been in enough rooms with Mitchell to picture it. Knuckles pressed into the marble table, jaw clenched so hard it could crack glass. His voice dropping to that deadly quiet tone he saved for when vendors missed deadlines. Get legal. Now and then came the second storm. At precisely 6:47 p.m., an email blast went out from Everlock Capital, our lead investor. Subject line: emergency meeting convened, compliance review. By 8, the auditors were in the building. I got that update from a friend still inside, one of the junior managers Ivy had ignored all day. She texted me a photo from the stairwell. 2 men in slate gray suits walking past security, carrying portfolios thick enough to double as bricks. Their faces expressionless, their pace unhurried. The kind of men who don't waste words because contracts speak louder than anything. Inside the boardroom, they laid the covenant on the table. The original, not the sanitized summary Ivy's intern had slapped into a PowerPoint. They circled my name. Laura Keller, material personnel. Then one of them asked the question no one in that room could answer. Do you have the $45 million penalty ready, or should we just take the keys? I wasn't there, but I swear I could feel the silence all the way across town. Ivy must have tried to bluff. That was her style. Hashtags and slogans, empty confidence. Maybe she said something about narrative control or reframing optics. But investors don't care about optics. They care about enforceable clauses. By then, messages were flooding my phone. Half panicked, half incredulous. Did you plan this? They're pulling financials, Laura. Everything's frozen. Mitchell looks like he's going to collapse. I didn't reply. I sat on my balcony, glass of Cabernet in hand, city lights blinking like nervous investors, and I let it all unfold. Because here's the truth. People like Ivy think power is inherited, that sitting in a big chair makes you a leader. But leadership is proven in footnotes, in late nights, in clauses no one else bothers to read. That's the irony. While she was posting filtered selfies about CEO life, I'd been preparing for exactly this day. And it was only the beginning. The auditors weren't just checking boxes. They were wolves circling blood in the water. They had the covenant, they had the proof, and they had 72 hours to decide whether to strip control from the Brants altogether. And Ivy? She didn't even realize the fight was no longer hers. That night, I opened my inbox again. One email stood out. A simple subject line, no punctuation. We should talk. From Mitchell Brant himself. I didn't answer. Not yet. Let him sweat. By morning, the company was on fire. Not literally, but in every way that matters to investors. Slack threads titled, Urgent, compliance were exploding with unanswered questions. The audit portal had already rejected 3 filings. Payroll approvals froze. And junior managers, the same ones Ivy had been preaching streamlining to just a day earlier, were whispering in hallways like frightened kids at a burning school. I didn't have to be there to know it. My phone lit up with frantic texts all morning. Laura, where do you keep the supplier compliance log? Did you file EU cross-border last quarter? No one can find it. Please tell me you backed up the investor portal credentials. I didn't respond. Because the truth was, they weren't looking for logs. They were looking for me. And the contract made it very clear. Without me, the whole operation was out of compliance. Around 9 a.m., Everlock's lead auditor arrived. Brandon Fields. I knew the name, even though we'd never spoken. Former litigator, reputation for surgical efficiency, the kind of man who never raised his voice because he didn't have to. He entered the boardroom without so much as a knock, placed a thick folder on the table, sat down at the head like he'd been there his entire life. From what one colleague later whispered to me, his words were cold, clipped, lethal. Clause 14C has been triggered. You have 72 hours. Either wire $45 million to the account listed here, or Everlock Capital assumes control. No one spoke. Ivy, of course, tried. She reached across the table with a bright, brittle smile. We can work this out, she said. I'm sure there's flexibility. Brandon didn't even look at her hand. He tapped the page where my name sat, circled in red ink. Your flexibility expired the moment you fired her. The silence after that must have been unbearable. Mitchell sat stiff, knuckles pressed into the wood. Gregory, the CFO, fiddled with his wedding ring like it might save him. Rachel, the company's general counsel, stared at her laptop as if a loophole might magically appear if she scrolled long enough. But there was no loophole. I knew that, because I helped write it. The irony was delicious. For years, Mitchell had dismissed my obsession with contracts as paranoia. Laura, don't bog us down in details. Investors care about vision, but vision doesn't save you when your daughter signs a crooked stamp on an unauthorized termination. By lunchtime, the panic had spread beyond the boardroom. Departments froze. Vendors called, confused why payments hadn't cleared. HR drafted 3 different memos, all of them scrapped before they could be sent. Meanwhile, I was sitting at a diner on the edge of town, sipping black coffee and watching it all unfold through the quiet back channel of my old admin account, the one nobody ever thought to revoke. The messages were frantic. The managers were drowning. And the board? They were starting to realize they had no life raft without me. That's when the first real crack appeared. One of my old colleagues forwarded me an email chain. At the top was Ivy's own message, sent 2 weeks before she fired me. Subject line, cutting the deadwood. She had written, in her own words, we need to clean house before Q4 gets here. Starting with Laura. She's deadwood. If anyone raises legal, I'll call it a restructure. We'll bury it in the reorg reading it. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because arrogance always leaves fingerprints. And this one was already in Everlock's hands. That email wasn't a restructuring note. It was evidence. Evidence of deliberate termination and breach of contract. Evidence of retaliation. Evidence that would tighten the noose around Ivy's neck faster than any investor clause could. By mid-afternoon, my attorney Anderson called. "They're bleeding," he said simply. "Investors are circling. Mitchell is demanding a meeting with you." I swirled the last of my coffee in the cup. "And Ivy?" A pause. Cracking. "She's pacing the halls like a trapped animal. Every attempt at confidence collapses under her father's stare." I leaned back against the diner booth, staring at the highway outside. Cars flowed steady, oblivious. Life went on, but for the Brants, time was running out. "You want me to go in?" I asked. Anderson chuckled. "Not yet. The longer you wait, the more desperate they get. Let the penalty clock tick." And so I did. As evening fell, my phone buzzed again. Another email from Mitchell. This one, not just a line. "Laura, we need to meet. Tonight. Please. Please." From Mitchell Brant, the man who once told me everyone was replaceable. I closed the email without replying. Because for the first time in 12 years, I was the one holding the cards. And the game was only beginning. When I finally agreed to meet, it wasn't in the boardroom. Not yet. Mitchell insisted on dinner. A private corner at a quiet steakhouse uptown. The kind of place where the wine list has no prices and the waiters pretend not to hear. He looked older than I remembered. Maybe it was the flight. Maybe it was the weight of watching his empire collapse in less than 48 hours. "Laura," he said as soon as I sat down. No pleasantries, no smile. Just my name, spoken like it hurt his throat. I let him talk first. Years of working with Mitchell had taught me that silence unnerves him more than confrontation. "They blindsided me," he said finally. "I had no idea she was—" His jaw locked. He didn't say Ivy's name. This was reckless. Short-sighted. And now Everlock is breathing down my neck like wolves. "You know what they're threatening I do," I said calmly. 45 million, he muttered, as if saying it aloud might make it less real. "We don't have it. Not liquid. Not even close. If they take control—" He trailed off, staring into his glass of scotch. The silence stretched between us. Around us, forks clinked on plates, conversations hummed, but the weight at our table made it feel like a vacuum. Finally, I leaned forward. "Mitchell, you should know something. They're not bluffing." His eyes flicked up. For the first time in years, I saw fear there. "I helped draft that covenant," I continued. "I know every word, every footnote. The clause was designed to protect investors from exactly this. An impulsive executive removing a stabilizing stakeholder. There's no wiggle room." He scrubbed a hand across his face. "I should never have let her—" He stopped himself again, swallowed, and started over. "What do you want, Laura? You didn't come here just to watch me drown." I held his gaze. "I want what I built to survive. But I won't step back into chaos." The waiter arrived, interrupting with plates of food we wouldn't touch. Mitchell waved him away, then leaned in, voice low. "If you came back, full authority, the investors would be satisfied. They'd rescind the breach." "You know they would." "Maybe," I said. "But that's not my problem anymore. You let her make it mine when you handed her the stamp." He flinched. Not visibly, not to anyone else. But I saw it. The truth landing like a blade. "Laura." His voice softened, almost pleading now. "She's my daughter." "And I was your backbone," I said. "When the servers caught fire, when the auditors circled, when the contracts nearly fell apart, I held it together. You let her throw me out like I was nothing. That wasn't just her mistake. It was yours." He sat back, shoulders sagging. For once, Mitchell Brant didn't look like a titan of industry. He looked like a man cornered. "I need time," he muttered. If I can stall them, find funding. I shook my head. You don't have time. The auditors will be back tomorrow, and the board knows it. He stared at me for a long moment, then finally said the words I'd been waiting for. So what now? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled a small envelope from my bag and slid it across the table. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter from Everlock's oversight team. Effective upon breach, operational oversight may be reassigned at investor discretion. Advisory rights may be delegated to external parties at Everlock's choosing. His eyes lifted to mine. Realization dawning. You, he said slowly. Me, I confirmed. They've already reached out. Quietly. They don't trust her. They don't trust you. They trust me. The scotch glass trembled slightly in his hand. And if I refuse? Then you'll lose everything, I said, my voice steady. Your board knows it. Your investors know it. And Ivy? I let the silence finish the sentence. He exhaled heavily, like the fight had left him. For the rest of the dinner, we said little. The food went cold. By the time I left, Mitchell still hadn't touched his steak. He just sat there staring at that piece of paper like it was the death warrant of his dynasty. Back in my car, I checked my phone. A new email had arrived. From Brandon Fields, the auditor himself. Emergency meeting, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Attendance required. Covenant enforcement discussion required, not optional. I leaned back in the driver's seat, the city lights flickering in my rear view. Tomorrow wasn't going to be dinner in a quiet corner. Tomorrow was going to be war in the boardroom. And for once, I wouldn't be the one waiting to be called in. I'd be the one walking through those glass doors with the investors at my back. The next morning, I didn't dress for war. I dressed for clarity. Simple black suit, no jewelry except the watch I'd worn through every deal that kept the company alive. When I walked into the lobby, no one stopped me. Not security, not reception. They all looked down, pretending not to notice. Word had spread. Everyone knew Clause 14C had been triggered, and everyone knew whose name was on it. The boardroom was packed. Executives, lawyers, auditors, faces pale, papers scattered, coffee gone cold. At the head of the table sat Brandon Fields, Everlock's lead auditor. Same slate gray suit, same unreadable face. Mitchell was already there, shoulders stiff, eyes hollow. Ivy sat 2 seats down, a perfect mask of defiance cracking at the edges. Her phone was face down in front of her, as if even she knew no hashtag could fix this. Brandon began without ceremony. We are here under Clause 14C of the Funding Covenant. Termination of designated material personnel without advisement constitutes breach. The penalty is $45 million or immediate assumption of control by Everlock Capital. He tapped the covenant on the table. My name, circled in red. No one spoke. Gregory, the CFO, looked like he hadn't slept in days. Rachel, legal counsel, flipped through her binder, searching for air in a drowning pool. Mitchell kept his eyes fixed on the table. Finally, Ivy broke the silence. This is an overreaction, she said, her voice pitched high, brittle. We can negotiate. Frame this differently. The optics... Brandon didn't even turn his head. This isn't optics. It's contract law. Her words withered in the air. Mitchell finally looked up. His voice was gravel. We can't pay the penalty. The admission hung there like a death sentence. Gregory's pen stopped moving. Rachel closed her binder. Every board member knew what came next. Brandon adjusted his cufflinks and continued. Per covenant language, Everlock will assume oversight. Effective immediately, he slid a black folder across the table. Transition documents are ready for signature. The room went still. Ivy surged to her feet. You can't just take my company. Brandon raised one eyebrow. Your company? He pushed the folder toward Mitchell. Sign. Mitchell's hand hovered over the pen. He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the man I used to work for. The one who built an empire with grit and instinct. The man who once told me trust was everything. But trust is fragile. And he had broken mine. He signed. Slowly, deliberately, his name scratched onto paper like a resignation from his own legacy. Brandon closed the folder with surgical precision. Then he turned to me. Per Everlock's directive, advisory rights are being delegated externally. Miss Keller, that means you. Every head in the room snapped toward me. Ivy's face drained of color. Her? You're putting her in charge? Brandon's voice was calm, final. Everlock trusts stability, and Miss Keller is stability. The words landed like a gavel. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I simply placed my hands on the table, palms steady. The first step, I said evenly, is compliance. The second is rebuilding trust. And that starts today. The board nodded, some reluctantly, some with visible relief. They wanted survival. I was offering it. Ivy, though, wasn't finished. She stood trembling, mascara smudged, fists clenched. This isn't over, she hissed. I'll fix this. I'll prove. Mitchell cut her off, his voice sharper than I'd heard it in years. Sit down, Ivy. She froze. Her own father. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Slowly, she sank back into her chair. And just like that, her reign was over. The meeting adjourned within the hour. Brandon left without shaking hands, his job done. Gregory muttered about numbers. Rachel avoided eye contact. Mitchell lingered by the window, staring out at a skyline that no longer belonged to him. I gathered my things calmly. No basket, no ceremony, just quiet recognition from the people who had once dismissed me. In the hallway, I passed Ivy. She didn't look at me. Her phone buzzed in her hand, but she didn't answer. For the first time, she seemed small. Not powerful, not untouchable. Just a young woman who thought inheritance was the same as leadership, and learned too late that it wasn't. Outside, the air was crisp, clear. I walked down the steps, past the glass doors, and into the sunlight. My phone buzzed again. An email from Everlock confirming my new advisory role. A title, not in-house, but powerful enough to decide the direction of the company I had once bled for. I smiled, not out of revenge, but out of something steadier. Vindication. Because here's the truth. Power isn't inherited. It's earned in the quiet moments, the footnotes, the late nights when no one's watching. And when arrogance burns down the house, it's the foundation that survives.